Alright friends, today I want to go over the list of balance changes that have been proposed by the Balance Council as well as the community response, which as always is absolutely freaking insane. I had already made this video and I was done with it, you know, I got my opinions out of the way, and then the Reddit thread got posted with the changes that were included, and I read some of the comments and this actually hurts my freaking brain. There's people that just don't understand it, that don't play the test mod and start complaining before they've even tried anything at all. There's a freaking balance test tournament coming up next week as well, in which afterwards changes are still going to be allowed through if things appear to be too strong. I don't understand what the freaking outrage is about. It is pissing me off, quite frankly. I wasn't even too involved with the creation of this balance. I am a part of the Balance Council, but this is absolutely bonkers to me. Let's just go over the list of changes. I'll tell you what I think about them first glance, having played about maybe 25 to 30 games in total on the mod, and then we'll have a look at the comments, and it's gonna be very special, let me tell you that. All right, let's first reach the patch goals. So the patch goals are to make Protoss more stable on a professional level in the early game versus Terran, and more competitive against late game Terran armies with Ghost. It tries to increase the variety in the mid-game and late-game army compositions by reducing the strength of certain units in large amounts. Banelings, Disruptors, and Ghost. It tries to make over-specialized units viable throughout more stages of the game, and this refers to Cyclones, Motherships, and Infestors. It tries to bring more visual clarity to important units on the minimap, as well as relevant abilities like Widowmine targeting and Disruptor's cooldown indicator. And it tries to promote more interaction in late game scenarios by making units such as Tempest, Mothership, and Broodlord more maneuverable. I think all of these goals are fair goals to have in the current state of StarCraft 2 professional play, except maybe making Protoss more competitive against late game Terran armies with Ghost. I think in the very late game, Protoss honestly is quite okay against Terran. I'm not entirely sure why this is one of the goals, but it is one of the goals. And we'll see if these changes will, well, in my opinion, manage to get that effect through. Starting with the Cyclone. Now, the Cyclone is the unit that receives the biggest makeover, because it basically is a complete rework here of the unit. It has a cost reduction, it doesn't require a tech lab anymore, it goes down in supply, and its stats get nerfed by quite a bit. It is a unit that will not ignore armor any longer, but is more of a straight up fighting unit that can be built throughout the game, kind of in a more battle mech type of way. This is a unit that I personally have some worries about after the rework. I think in a lot of fights it feels very strong, especially after the new speed upgrade that got introduced, and I think it is good and wise to monitor how this unit is going to perform in the upcoming weeks of testing, as well as in the balanced test tournament that is coming up in the upcoming weekend. I truly do believe that, especially at the lower levels, the Cyclone could be a unit for Protoss as well as for Zerg that could completely ruin the matchup, or at least make it very difficult to have a good time. And I think everyone is aware of that. The moment there's a unit rework, that you're always going to be monitoring those things. Hotfixes and changes are always going to be possible. Let's just keep that in mind. But yeah, it's a unit that basically has a complete rework, which I think is very exciting. I know a lot of people have wanted reworks on units just to kind of keep the game fresh, to stop it from getting so still. And I think this is a very good start, starting with the Cyclone. Following up with the Ghost. Now, the Ghost has its snipe damage reduced from 170 to 130, and the EMP radius reduced from 175 to 1.5. Reducing the radius of the EMP will encourage Protoss to use Psystorm in the PvT matchup and help in straight-up engagement versus Terran armies. Snipe will no longer one-shot units such as Zealots and Roaches, as well as requiring an extra shot to kill Ultralisk in the late game versus Zerg, generally reducing their cost efficiency over time, while still being able to kill important spellcasters such as Vipers. I think these are good changes. I think EMP right now is too strong against Protoss. There are a couple of ways this can be fixed. I think this is one of them. Reducing the radius is a little bit of a meme at this point, because we've been going up, we've been going down, we've been going up, we've been going down. But I think this is a change that will definitely help for Protoss, especially if we combine them with changes that happen to Protoss itself as well, which we'll get to later, of course. Now, the snipe damage is not too relevant for Protoss, but is relevant in the TVZ late game, in which the Ghost is well, tends to be very strong and also tends to be a very dominant force, numbers-wise, but also when it comes to damage output in the late-game fight. So I'm kind of happy to see a nerf there. I think Terran is too reliant on the Ghost, and I'm happy to, you know, see that power being scaled back. I think one of the goals in general is to have units that are messable. I think it mentioned the Disruptor and the Ghost, and maybe one more earlier. Just to be capable, well, was it? Right, Banelings as well, to not have them as messable anymore. And I think this is a good way of going about that. Right, the Baneling as well. Well, we'll get to that later. Now, then the Widow Mine. The Widow Mine, drilling claws, makes the Widow Mine unburrow twice as fast. For the people that are not aware, drilling claws is the upgrade you can research from your tech lab on a factory that makes the Widow Mine burrow faster. This is completely irrelevant against Protoss. This upgrade does not get researched in the TVP matchup. I can't state this enough. This has no effect whatsoever on TVP. The last time that we saw drilling claws being researched in TVP was probably 2 map pools ago when I got destroyed by Milky Cow, who did a fast drilling claws rush. This is not a build order that is good. This is a build order that sucks massively, and this has no effect at all at the Terran versus Protoss high level. This is... I'm willing to fight anyone for this with words. I'm not a very strong fighter with the fist, but I'll debate anyone on this. I'm sure I'll win. I'm not a good debater, but I'll win this. That I do know. As well as making the targeted line more visible, making it easier to split the correct correct unit away, or you know, just in general figuring out that there is a mine. That is a nice thing. I think increasing visibility was one of the goals of the patch, and this is definitely going to help. Next, the medevac. The speed upgrade gets replaced with Caduceus Reactor. It increases energy regeneration rate by 100%. And so it removes the speed upgrade. This is a new upgrade. I think this is not going to be used very much in the early stages. It will be used, I think, a lot more than the speed upgrade in the later stages. It still is not a gas priority for Terran. I think there's a lot of things in the mid game that require gas more and is more urgent than this particular upgrade. I could be wrong about it. Maybe it's going to be very useful, but I think majority of the time, this is not an upgrade that's going to be freaking huge to have. It's nice, but it's going to have a niche role, perhaps some in TVZ. Maybe we'll see it in TVT and TVP. It's hard for me to predict, but small little change. The minimap radius has been increased from 0.75 to 1. Take a look at this picture as the Prism, the Overlord, and the medevac, all their current sizes on the minimap. The Overlord is the biggest, the Prism is 0.875, and the medevac was 0.75. That is now all going to be the same size as the Overlord. This is really big. This is nice. This also helps at the lower level, in my opinion, where people are a bit worse at looking at the minimap. So having a bigger blob moving is definitely going to be very helpful. And I'm a fan, personally, of this change. I think this is good. I think Astrea is the one that really wanted this change for a very long time. So I'm glad to see this happen. Next, the Raven. The interference matrix now requires an upgrade. This is huge in high-level Terran versus Protoss. Not necessarily because of the cost, although the cost is a nice added-on bonus. Terran usually struggles for gas in the early game, so pulling out another 50 gas somewhere is definitely going to suck. But the research time being longer than the build time of the Raven means that the window in which the timing attack of the Terran hits gets moved a bit. Because the way that it works is that if the starport is still researching, that starport cannot be building a reactor. And if a starport cannot be building a reactor, that means we're not going to be seeing fast medevacs out. If the medevacs are delayed, that means that the first push comes later and Protoss has more time to set up. So A, it costs more money, and B, the push, even if the money is spent, is going to hit later when it comes to Raven versus Colossus pushes. This is freaking huge because often these pushes have a very small timing window of winning. They either win the game or they hardly do anything. The Raven is very hit or miss in TVP. I think this is an ugly solution to the problem of fixing 3-1-1 type of pushes with a Raven out of Terran, but it is a solution that, in my opinion, is definitely going to contribute to Protoss not dying as much against the first 3 Rex push that Terran executes. So I think this is a useful change, albeit a very ugly one. Up next, the Lurker. A straight up nerf here, as the adaptive talents move speed bonus gets removed. The upgrade gets made a little bit cheaper, but this feels like a fake buff, because usually at the timing where adaptive talents get researched, Zerg is so rich that honestly a 50-50 cost reduction is completely irrelevant. This is just a straight up nerf, and we should talk about it like a straight up nerf. Next, the Infestor. Pathogen Glance gets removed. Infestor starting energy increased from 50 to 75, and the fungal growth cast range gets reduced from 10 to 9 as well. Now, I think this is generally a nerf for the Infestor, how it is used in Protoss versus Zerg, where its main use is in the late game when getting Pathogen Glance is not going to be much of an issue. So the only buff it gets is getting rid of Pathogen Glance. The rest is just simply nerfed. Versus Terran, you could see that there are some uses in maybe sprinkling them in a bit earlier now as you're teching into Hive, as they generally have more use in that matchup. I don't really see them as being very useful in Protoss versus Zerg being sprinkled in one by one, because very often Protoss players will just have Templar out in general in their army or Disruptors. And I don't know, the TOS army, it fights pretty well against fungal in general. And the fungal growth damage also has been reduced. So once again, a good thing here for Protoss. At least that's what it feels like to me. Up next, the Spire. Air armor upgrade cost reduced, blah, 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 blah. This is very unimportant. It basically makes the air armor upgrade the same as the air weapons, because air armor is worse than weapons, and they want, for some reason, armor was more expensive. God knows why, but it was the case. Viper, consumed damage has been reduced from 200 to 150. This reduces the intention required for gathering Viper energy, because your buildings are less likely to be killed. This is especially nice for lower level players, although higher level players also sometimes still kill their Hive or their hatchery or their extractor or their evo. So it's just a quality of life change, and it's nice. I don't really care about this. Then moving over to the Broodlord. Move speed has been increased by 0.4, but the Broodling gets his move speed reduced by more than 1.2-ish. Broodling health reduced from 30 to 20. Broodling attack speed reduced from 0.46 to 0.57. Continuing in the direction of the last balance update, further increasing Broodlord mobility while further reducing the strength of Broodlings to compensate should allow for more active play in the late game. I agree with this. Personally, I would like to see the impact damage buffed a little bit more. I freaking hate Broodlings. If we somehow can get rid of the Broodling altogether or make it even worse, I wouldn't personally mind that. I think that would be... you would get a double thumbs up from your boy Harstem. Harstem would look at that and say, double thumbs up for slowly but surely, the Broodling is on the way out. Me and my homies all hate the Broodling. And that remains true forever. All right, so yeah, overall just a nerf to the Broodlord, in my mind. Tiny little speed buff, but the Broodling significantly worse, especially when it comes to health, is going to help quite a bit for both Archons and little Stalker engagements that you might have. Moving over to the Overlord, these two changes allow the Overlord to poop creep quicker. Whatever, I literally don't care about that. And a small upgrade, a small buff for the upgraded Overlords. The Dropper Lord, a speed increase both after Pneumatized Carapace and before Pneumatized Carapace. So that's nice. Moving on to the Ultralisk, a small cost reduction. This is honestly the reason why these changes are in. I know why these changes are in. Is because Zerg players all have the IQ of, well, idiotic sloth. Let's put it like that. Zerg players, when they look at a changelog like this, rather than looking at individual changes and how they affect things, they just count them. So a Zerg player looks at this list and goes, oh, Ultralisk buff, burrow unburrow time buff, wow, that is all great. And he sees like, oh, creep pooping faster, and he's just counting on his fingers how many buffs they get and how many nerfs. And then if they get more buffs than nerfs, they have a little Zerg party, transfuse each other, or whatever Zergs do when they party, chill in the spawning pool. So yeah, that's why these changes are going through. No one really cares about this. 25 minerals less for an Ultra. Here you go, Zergs. It's useless. You enjoy your little 25 minerals in the late game. Hey, come on. Ridiculous. Hydralisk up next. Speed plus range upgrades combined. This means that Hydralisk all-ins are going to be more powerful. Hydralisk will be on the map earlier and will be online a lot quicker. Not only is it cheaper, is it actually cheaper? No, it's actually quite expensive. It's just going to hit much faster, which is crazy. Yeah, we've had a lot of Hydra all-ins in the past. They're very strong. They're going to become very strong. We're going to see Protoss players at every level lose to Hydra all-ins again. Zergs are going to try Hydra all-ins again. Very often, these build orders are quite good already, and then Zerg players forget that they exist, and then they get buffed. They're like, wait, we could use the Hydra? That's a unit we're allowed to build? And then they start Hydra all-inning, and they win every single game. This is literally what happens. This is what's going to happen. They're going to win a lot with Hydra Lins. Protoss players will need to adapt a little bit. I still think Hydras, especially rushing them out very fast, is expensive, and I enjoy playing against it. I don't struggle against it so much. I haven't struggled so much in the balanced test mod either. So I'm looking forward to that. Just being Hydra Lin, me holding it, and collecting my free win. Moving on to the Baneling. The bonus damage per upgrade has been reduced from 2 and 2 versus light to 2 in general versus all. This means that probes or drones will not get one shot anymore by Banelings with +2 attack. I think we're allowed to dance a little bit. We're allowed to be happy as Protosses around the world. You know, we can put our fist up in the air and be happy. Because I think this is freaking huge. Like, this is so nice. This is, chef's kiss. It is beautiful. Finally, a single Baneling running in is not going to kill 35 workers anymore. I am ecstatic about this, okay? This is a huge change. Huge nerf to Zerg. A lot of their timings revolve around getting +2 just to kill workers. Now, those timings are gone. Suck it. Bye-bye. No shot. These guys are going to beat me ever again. On top of that, centrifugal hooks get some fake buffs over here. Cost reduced to 100. Research time reduced to 71. But the health bonus gets reduced. So once again, nerfing the Baneling in the mid game and in the late game. The Baneling is just overall nerfed, making a timing slightly better. So the Baneling speed can hit quicker. The Hydra thing can hit quicker. So Hydra Bane timers are going to hit like a freaking truck. But if you manage to survive those, these are really just the first initial timings, yeah? We're talking about timings of 66 drones, not 75, 85 drones. No, 66 Hydra Banelins, 55 drone Hydra Lins. These are going to hit like a truck. Anything afterward is going to be weaker, and significantly weaker, really significantly weaker. This is to reduce the strength of mass Banelings armies in the mid-game and reduce the volatility in defending Baneling run-wise by requiring multiple Banelings to kill workers. The speed upgrade will require less of an investment to maintain a similar balance for 2 base Terran Marine tank baselines. I think also the health bonus being removed needs to be very carefully monitored when it comes to Terran in general, because I mean, Terran just requires less shots to take out Banelings now with Marines, which can actually be pretty big. I'm afraid of that. I'm afraid that that's going to get reverted because of the CVT. That is scary. But so far, if we take this, we put this all together in a package. As a Protoss player, you look at this and you think to yourself, at the highest level, these are impactful changes. I think that to myself. I've played the games. Like, I've played this freaking mod for like a week now, 5 days, whatever. And I noticed that these changes have an impact. I can feel that I'm winning way more against people I usually am not winning against. And we haven't even mentioned the Protoss changes. Let's get to that now. Okay. Shield upgrade cost reduced, my friends. Yes, sir. It's a lot cheaper. Starting at +2 and +3, it's becoming just a tiny bit cheaper, which is nice. Shield upgrades are less useful than attack/armor upgrades for both air and ground units in different scenarios. Current change helps increasing cost/efficiency ratio for the shield upgrades. This will help specifically in PvZ and not at all in PvT because EMP is still a thing. The cybernetic score has the same change as the Spire had, in which we see that the upgrade of the air weapons and the armor gets pulled to the same level. The War Prism, the minimap radius gets increased from 0.875 to 1. I've mentioned this before and I showed you the picture. Then to the nerf. Huge nerf. Well, no, this is a nerf, all right? The supply cost gets increased from 3 to 4. And this is annoying. This is to transfer away power from the disruptor to other units. And mainly taking them away from the disruptors. It's a bit of an oppressive unit. Playing against mass disruptor tends to not be very fun for most races, and especially for Terran. I think design-wise, this is a good change. Does it scare me a bit? Because the disruptor by itself is such a staple in PvT late game? Yes, this does scare me a bit. Do I truly believe that Templar will be completely viable against the new, smaller EMP radius? I'm not sure. I don't actually know. I haven't tested that too much. We'll have to see. I also think this will not have a huge impact. I think it's going to be, something. It's definitely going to be something, but I don't think it's going to have a huge impact. It will have an impact. I mean, your army will just be, if you have well, if you have 8 disruptors, it will be 8 supplies smaller. So you'll have 4 less stalkers or 4 less zealots or, you know, for, I don't know, 8 less probes. It's lots of things that we could do the currency exchange with. But yeah, on top of that, the model scale has been reduced by 9 and the radius increased to 0.625. It is currently hard to tell which disruptors have Purification Nova available when multiple are clumped together as the models intersect with each other. I honestly never have this issue, but that might just be because I'm very smart. And this is just maybe a help for Zerg players and Terrans. Really, this is just showing that they're mentally incapable of, well, most basic tasks. Once again, showing that Protoss really is the superior faction when it comes to mental power, in my opinion. Moving over, Prismatic Alignment move speed with Flux Veins increased from 2.6 to 3.4. This was basically bugged for 3 years. No one realized until 3 weeks ago. And now it is getting fixed. This is not a proposed change. This is just a change. This one's going through 100%, no matter what happens. The Tempest. Acceleration/deceleration increased from 2.1 to 4.2, as well as a model scale being reduced by 10%. This improves the feeling of actively microing the Tempest, as the slow acceleration makes them feel slow to respond when not already moving. Very cool indeed, as that just means it's easier to play against Tempest, Battlecruisers, Vikings, Battlecruisers, Broodlords, Viper, Corruptor, Carriers, really anything that is annoying. Tempest are going to be slightly better. Right now the kiting can be quite hard, the movement is a little bit slow. This is definitely going to make them a bit better, which will have an impact at the higher level. Moving over to the mothership. Cost reduced, basically the second real unit rework in my opinion. It becomes much cheaper, it becomes less supply, it builds faster, it moves quicker, and the lateral acceleration gets increased. The movement is really crazy, as you can see. On top of that, it no longer has energy, so it can't be EMP'd to deny time warps and recalls. The time warp and the recall do get nerfed, and the cloak field is no longer passive. So I think this is a significant nerf to the mothership in PvZ in the very late game, but it's a buff in PvZ and PvT in the early stages of the late game. So it comes out quicker and it is less important, but still important. I actually think we'll see more of it in all matchups, but it's going to be less impactful. I'm very curious, especially how the cloaking field is going to work in the late game. Kind of excited for it. I think it's going to be significantly worse. Moving over to the Sentry, as the Guardian Shield duration increases by about 2 seconds, this is going to help against Ghost. So you use Guardian Shield before the Ghost can engage and you have 2 extra seconds. Not a huge change, but still, it's nice. I mean, it's 2 extra seconds. I'm not going to say no to 2 extra seconds. Then the Oracle Stasis Ward change. I'm not quite sure which Protoss managed to get this change in. There is a Protoss out there. I don't know who it is, okay? But there is a Protoss in the Balance Council right now that's looking at this change and knows that this is what he did. This is what he did. No one else has any clue why the Stasis Ward gets a side range increase from 4 to 7. I don't think the Oracle is a bad unit. I don't think the Stasis Ward had too little vision. It says allow Stasis Ward to be used for more central map vision with Stargate-based openings. I don't think I ever really struggle with vision if I have Oracles out, because I have Revelation, but beautiful. I love it. You know, I'm biased too. I'm a Protoss player. I want to win some freaking tournaments. This patch is going to make me do it. Now, moving over to the final Protoss change. The Immortal. The Immortal Barrier will now also block the first instant of damage, which triggers the barrier. This, a lot of you are not going to understand what this means. I didn't understand what it means. I'm stupid. I'm a Protoss. I didn't get it. This basically means if you get EMP'd, pre-patch, what happens is your Immortal gets EMP'd. You lose your shield, and then the barrier activates. So you basically lose shield and barrier at the same time with a click of one mouse. After this change gets introduced, if you hit an Immortal with your EMP, the barrier gets used immediately at the first instance of damage. So you clear the barrier immediately with that EMP, but the shields remain intact. That means that Immortals now require 2 EMPs in order to completely clear the shields. This is a really big change. The amount of power extra that the Immortal is going to have in fights is freaking huge. It becomes bait right now for Ghost to EMP. And on top of that, there's an EMP radius reduction as well, so it's already going to be harder to get more in there. I think the Immortal as a transitionary tool is extremely powerful after this patch, or will become significantly more powerful. If it's good now, it's going to become very good after. If you think it's bad right now, it's going to become good. I think that's the case. I don't actually know where I would rate the Immortal. I think it's a good unit, not brilliant. I think it's going to be a very nice unit to have in compositions against Terran. All right, let's get into it. I think, honestly, a lot of the worst comments have been voted towards the bottom while I was recording this video for the 17th time, but there's still a lot of them here. So here we get my man Mobile Utility Lunar X. Most of this reads pretty fun. Banelings no longer one-shotting with +2 will be interesting. Then Omno55 responds with, at the highest level, we rarely see people dying to Widowmine drops. The buff only helps them unburrow, so just a slightly higher chance of them getting picked back up. The drop and burrow is unchanged, okay? This is true. And then we get a response from Heaven StarCraft. At the highest level, blah, blah, just quotes this. Lol, this is just not true. I've seen Showtime get wrecked over and over. Now, what people don't realize when they argue this, and they're not reading properly, is that this only affects the drilling claws. This has absolutely nothing to do with a good old regular Widowmine drop. It's not going to unburrow faster. Drilling claws legit doesn't get researched in TVP. It just doesn't happen. And we see the same sentiment further down as well, if we ever get there before my heart explodes. It's like, people just don't read and they start commenting. No one has played the test mods because the first thing they do is they skim kind of through it, they see changes, they get upset, start typing like mad. Like, we actually need data from every single level. It is very important that people give feedback on this patch. This is the biggest patch that the Balance Council has brought out yet. It is practically useless to tell us what you think without having played. What people need to do is to play the game on their level, upload the replays, and explain as well what they felt like the issues were in the games. Are these things fun to play against? Do they suck? Like, there's no point in pretending that drilling claws is a real issue at high-level PvT, when it absolutely isn't. You're not gonna find a single high-level Protoss player that will tell you that drilling claws in Protoss versus Terran is something they actively lose sleep about. I honestly can't even remember the last time I played against someone researching drilling claws. Actually, I do remember. I lost to Stargazers. I lost on Stargazers the Milky Cow, doing mass drilling claw mine drops. Trust me, I didn't lose that because the mine burrowed too fast. I lost that because I'm an idiot. And, he won before the patch. He still would win after the patch in that particular game. But it's so bad. It really, please, if you're a Protoss player, you want to complain about something, complain about the Archon being too weak against Terran. Don't complain about the mine unburrowing fast after drilling claw. This is completely useless. Okay, moving down, we get Aaron and Notch TV saying, Terran gets a new Cyclone timing attack, that's neat. Zerg gets a cool new Hydra timing attack. I don't like the rework personally, but I like the idea of overall improving the Hydra. But what does TOS get? A worse mothership, now a side ship, and less buggy units. Where's the new timing attack for TOS? How does this make them more viable in the pro scene? Well, this is actually a fairly well thought out thing, or well, it's a nicely worded comment. I think a lot of the comments on Reddit are actually relatively mean. This guy seems like a nice dude. Well, the main issue that Protoss has at the highest level is, one, they're very often dying against the first timing attack that Terran has. With the Raven nerf, that should be less. And B, the moment Ghost enter the field and Terran has map control, I think that is the worst stage of Protoss. When the Colossus don't quite cut it anymore against high numbers of Marauders and Ghost. For that, you have an EMP nerf, as well as an Immortal that is going to be hopefully a lot more useful against Terran. If that's not the case, then things can still be fixed there, but I don't think we want TOS necessarily to have much more timing attacks. I think TOS just wants to be more secure versus Terran in the first stages of the game, and especially against the first 3-1-1 push. I think that is very important. When people talk about Protoss being weak in the early game against Terran, I think people often imagine scenarios of constantly dying to Widow Mines or 1-1-1 pushes, but in reality, what most professional players think of when being weak in the early game against Terran, it means dying against the first push that Terran does with Stim and Combat Shield, often in combination with a Raven. And I think Colossi defenses are really going to be significantly better over here. Then we have local 4890. Can someone tell me if I'm wrong in this assessment? P gets the short end of the stick once more. Yeah, you're wrong in that assessment. T gets a mid-game buff and a late-game nerf. A mid-game buff and a late-game nerf. Yeah, also wrong there. And Z gets late-game buffs when this is the race that can shoot up to the late game the quickest. I guess he sees the Broodlord as a buff because there's a small speed buff and the Ultralisk losing 25 minerals. It's also going to be harder for Zerg to get to a straight late game. I just don't understand these comments. I just don't get it. It's obvious to me that these people have not tried it. They can't have tried it because the first thing they did is they saw the thread pop up and they just respond with a comment. I mean, look, I don't think these changes are perfect. I understand that. I also understand that the way that the Balance Council communicates has been very poor. I think they're trying to improve it, but as individual members of the Balance Council, you can't really do much about it because we signed an NDA and people are pushing to have a more transparent way of doing things. Trust me, it's often the people that get flamed the most in public that want things to be more transparent so that we don't get flamed anymore. But also give a little bit of credit. At least try things before you criticize them completely. Like, it's fine to say, wow, I wonder about this, I wonder about that, but saying that TVP mines are going to be too strong or saying that P gets the short end of the stick is just not in touch with StarCraft 2 reality. Then we get Esports Creator, so an insane upgrade to Medevac, 100% regeneration increase with the upgrade. Cyclone gets an all-around buff when players already make them in TVP as an Oracle defense. This makes Protoss more fragile in early mid-game. Widowmine retreat / reposition buff. Yeah, so let's just take these points down. So the 100% regeneration increase, it doesn't mean that medevacs heal 100% faster. It means that the medevac get their energy back faster. So this is I don't think this is that big at all in any stage of the game. I think it's a quality of life. You might need 2 less medevacs later on in the game. If you're in a very passive game, I think that's the only use really that there is. The Cyclone doesn't get an all-around buff. It gets a complete rework. It's a completely different unit. People that see this as a buff or a nerf haven't played with the Cyclone yet. If you play with the Cyclone, you'll see that the unit functions completely different. It is possible that it's way too strong. In that case, it will get nerfed. I'm pretty sure it even says that on the freaking patch notes as well. Is that everything is being monitored and nothing is set in stone. What else is there? Right, the Widowmine / retreat repossession buff is irrelevant for TVP, but maybe in TVZ it is kind of nice. Then there's a Hydra buff, a Broodlord buff. It is definitely a Broodlord nerf, my friend. It is not a buff. And Protoss get very minimal stuff in the hopes they use Stormor versus Terran. Yeah, no. Disruptor will still be the go-to because of its one-shot potential. What a horrible patch. I'm sorry. There is some good, but Protoss needs more than this. It is possible that Protoss needs more than this, but to say that the Broodlord gets a buff, and that Protoss somehow is getting worse buffs than the other races, I don't think it's true. I think if you ask any of the high-level players, including all Protosses, all Terrans and Zerg, I think if you look at these changes, you probably believe that Protoss didn't get the short end of the stick. They got by far the best changes, in my opinion. Whether that's enough to make them completely playable, that is to be seen. Like I said, there's a testing period coming up, but to say that the Broodlord is not a Broodlord, but it's a nerf. It's just not reading properly. All right, I'm actually done. I don't want to do this anymore. I'm sorry if I've upset some Protoss players in the past, and I apologize for the lack of communication when it comes to balance matters. This is not something that I individually can change. We'll continue, hopefully, communicating better with the community. Once again, as I said, please play the mods, upload the replays, and tell us what happens in the replays. Tell us your opinion at what happens on the lower level. Tell us your opinion of what happens on the higher level as well, you know, but play it first and then give the feedback. I think that's going to be very helpful. This is really a community effort, and we send the changes eventually to Blizzard, but initially it needs to come from the community, and that includes every single level as well. If there's something that's very frustrating at a certain level, then be sure to let us know. Like we're aware that the Widowmine is very good at lower levels as well. We're trying to find ways to, make it better, but it's very difficult. Yeah. Don't forget the Balance Council is a very large council as well. It's about 50 to 60 people. That's one thing that I can share. And so not everything that you individually want is always going to go through. Be sure to leave your feedback down in the comments below as well if you enjoyed this video, and I'll hopefully see all of you next time again for more stuff. Bye bye.